Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pradibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Puranamunina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambattvamanusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vitrekapanaya Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you all for joining us again. It's been 2 weeks, so we will pick up where we left off with a little bit of review in the beginning. 2 weeks ago, in the last class, Jnanadev left us with the introduction to the following verses, and he said this: Now I will explain to you how this threefold austerity, or tapas, is divided through its association with the three gunas. That means when you have this threefold austerity associated with sattva, rajas, and tamas. And he says, hear it and digest it with your powerful intellect. He's giving us kind of a big ego boost, even though he's talking to Arjuna. So in the previous chapter, Lord Krishna said that pure sattvic tendencies are divine virtues. This is the previous chapter, chapter 16. And he called them Daivi Sampat, which means the wealth, the divine wealth. But when we only think of ourselves, or are even willing to hurt others to satisfy our own needs and wants, then we are degrading ourselves to a demonic level. So he had these two extremes that he was talking about. It's not really the caricature image of a physical demon, but it's a human body with a selfish and cruel beast inside of that body. That's why such attributes are called demonic, because they're characteristics that convert a human being into an inhumane being. The present chapter also deals with divine and demonic, with positive and negative characteristics, but it's using slightly different terminology. So don't think of it as a completely different content. And earlier, Krishna said he was going to talk about 4 topics, of which 2 are already over, and that is food and ritual offerings. In the last class, 2 weeks ago, he talked about tapas, or we could call that self-imposed austerity for the sake of developing self-control. And as an introduction of sorts, he explained that there are different types of tapas, different types of austerity. Physical, it can be in our words, and it can also be mental. So the next step in Krishna's discourse is to further divide each form of tapas into three divisions based on guna, sattva, rajas, and tamas. So there's going to be sattvic tapas of the body, words, and mind. There's going to be rajasic tapas of body, word, and mind, and tamas tapas of body, words, and mind. So far, whenever Krishna talked about the various types of tapas, there were always do's and don'ts. Certain things to be done and other things that should not be done. For example, with regarding physical tapas, he said the do's are reverence of God, reverence to teachers and mentors, spiritual seekers and enlightened people. And the don'ts of physical tapas were not harming anyone or anything, and avoiding overindulgence in sense pleasures, food, sex, and all these things. The purpose of do's and don'ts is spirituality. In spirituality, is that they prevent us from becoming a slave of the body or mind, or both. We can enjoy the beauty of this world, because there are so many beautiful things. The flowers, it's the spring season, and becoming the summer season, it doesn't mean we can't enjoy flowers. But we should not forget that sensory enjoyment is only the lowest form of pleasure. There are much more satisfying enjoyments we can experience, especially around Amma, like a peaceful mind, contentment, the joy of devotion, and supreme bliss. Now, for an overall understanding of the traditional do's and don'ts, you can refer to the Yama Niyama section of the Yoga Sutras, which is already explained in many, many books, so we're not going to go over that here. We already covered that, actually, and I think it was chapter 6, a long time ago. And austerity of speech is more difficult than physical austerity because it is more subtle than physical actions. Speech is really like a subset of the mind, but a more concrete manifestation of what's going on inside the mind. When someone scolds us or criticizes us or blames us, we may retaliate with our own choice words to get revenge. Though the mind's reaction comes first, we still have the freedom to express or not express that reaction that comes in the mind. So we don't have to express it in the form of words. Instead, we can chant our mantra. These are the kind of ideas that were suggested so far. Now, we will continue from verse 17 of chapter 17 and see what the next topic has for us. As always, we will break the verses down in small portions in Sanskrit so you can repeat afterwards, and then we'll return to the beginning of each verse and chant it together. Shraddhaya paraya taptam tapastat trividham naraihi apalakankshyabhir yuktaihi satvikam parichakshate. Now together. Shraddhaya paraya taptam tapastatrividham naraihi apalakankshyabhir yuktaihi satvikam parichakshate. I did make a few alterations here. This threefold austerity performed by the steadfast, with utmost faith, desiring no fruit, is said to be sattvic. So what I changed was that word penance seems to have too much kind of a Judeo-Christian guilt kind of thing in it, so I just changed it with austerity that doesn't have that nuance. And you just removing the gender and so on. So let's listen to the commentaries that we have for this verse. Shankaracharya first, as always. He says that threefold means having respectively to do with the three seats, which means body, speech, and mind. We already knew that. And when he says with faith, it means believing in the existence of things taught in the scriptures. So faith is not just blind faith, it is based on the scriptures, and the presumption is that the scriptures are all coming from God-realized beings. So if one is of a spiritual bent, that should be enough for them to have faith. Jnaneshwar, we don't have a lot for this verse. He says the three kinds of austerities explained to you should be practiced with complete faith, dropping all longing for the fruit. Well, this is exactly what he's saying, but he's emphasizing it. And one modern commentator says, austerity loses its sanctity to the extent one seeks fruit or reward. So if you just want a little bit of reward for your austerity, maybe the sanctity is not reduced that much. But if it's entirely for that, then your austerity really doesn't have any benefit at all. So this verse covers, don't forget, this verse covers the overall requirements for sattvika tapas on all levels. So whether it's body, mind, words, or mind, the requirements are this. Basically, faith, not desiring the fruit, being steadfast, and yes, I think that is the main points. So it must be with the utmost faith. Even if we have no wealth or physical possessions, if we have our faith, our spiritual growth is assured. This is a beautiful concept because it means people might think, oh, I have to go to the temple and make big offerings and it's so expensive. I have to sign up for pujas and homas in order to grow on the spiritual path. He says, no, all you need is your faith. And that doesn't cost anything. Since Amma and the scriptures glorify tapas, we have faith that some kind of tapas or some kind of austerity is needed and will help us grow. That's basically the only reason we have initially. Over time, as we do some kind of austerities, we experience the fruits of them directly, and that bolsters our faith even more. And desiring no fruit is what would you expect it mean to be, that you should not look for any advantage from doing that austerity. Some people do tapas to get recognition from others or to go to heaven. These things come in the next verse. But sattvic tapas has no such desires. And since there are no ulterior motives, a seeker or a sadhak can pour themselves into the tapas fully. If you have other things on your mind, like, oh, it would be nice if I could get this from my tapas, or if I want to, maybe in my next birth I'll be rich and when I don't have any money this time around, so I'll do more austerities to get that. When we have other ideas mixed in with the austerities, then we don't get the full benefit of it. It's fractured into, however many desires that we have at that time. So if we can just forget about those and say, I don't want anything materially, I just want God, I just want to get rid of my weaknesses. I want to grow spiritually. That's okay, because it's a selfless idea. It doesn't sound selfless, but it is. Somebody who grows spiritually automatically become selfless. So yearning for spiritual growth means yearning to become selfless. So it is, in essence, a selfless desire. Now about steadfastness. If you've read the Mahabharata or Ramayana or one of these ancient epics, you will see that people had such steadfast willpower. They held their word and they never broke their promises, to the point of like ridiculousness, it seems to us. Today, the reason why it looks ridiculous to us is that because not only do people break their promises to others, they even break their promises to themselves. A person's intention may be to finish archana without doing anything else, but if they remember some chore that they forgot, just without thinking, they may sacrifice their own intention and make a phone call or get up and do something. In the old days, people wouldn't do things like that. They were so steadfast and that they would go to great lengths just to follow their will, whatever they had decided. And for us today, just our will or our resolve wavers way too much. This section is very similar to the Karma Yoga portion of chapter 3. And there's a verse in chapter 2 that leads up to Karma Yoga, and I'll share that with you. Established in yoga, perform actions having abandoned attachment and having become balanced in success and failure. For balance of mind is called yoga. A very famous verse at the end, towards the end of chapter 2. So selfless tapas, especially the physical kind, is basically karma yoga. When Amma comes to Chicago Ashram, when she goes anywhere, the volunteers will spend most of their day in the hall doing something, or in the kitchen doing something for the sake of the program. And they might not sleep hardly at all. Maybe just 2 or 3 hours, depending on what they're doing and when they can take a break. And Devi Bhava night, mostly nobody sleeps. So it's tapas of sorts. But it is sattvic because it's all for Amma, it's all for a selfless desire or a selfless goal. So it's basically the same thing. Karma yoga and pure sattvika tapas. And now Krishna is going to talk about rajasika or rajasic tapas, which is a far cry from the pure version of it, in verse 18. Sadkara manapujartam tapo dambhena chaivayat kriyate tadiha proktam rajasam chalamadhruvam. I did not change much. Oh, we're going to read the whole verse again, sorry. Slowly together. Satkara mana pujartam tapodambhena chaivayat kriyate tadiha proktam rajasam chalamadhruvam. That penance which is performed with the object of gaining fame, honor, and worship, or by way of ostentation, unstable and transitory, is called rajasic. So what I did was I deleted and yield only, and I deleted fruits for a reason, just to be exact. I'll tell you why in a moment. So it's a little bit shorter version of what our Gita translation says, but there's a reason why our ashram version is that way anyhow. So Shankaracharya's commentary, he says, fame means in such words as, here is a good seeker of great austerities. So they're looking to be praised by others for all their great deeds. And then he says, honor means the act of rising to greet, reverential salutation with palms joined like this, and so on. So they're expecting that. They want people to rise when they enter the hall. They want everybody should go like this to me and say, oh, you're so great. And then the worship part is the extreme part, which it means they're expecting people to wash their feet, adore them, and feed them, and all these kind of things. And when it comes to the word unstable, Shankaracharya says, as productive of a transient effect. So he clarifies that this unstable and transitory means that the fruits or the product of such austerity is unstable. So that's why our ashram has that there, but I wanted you to see just the bare minimum what the Sanskrit means. Now Jnaneshwar has a number of things to say. I had to edit it because it was so much. This one and the next couple of verses. Austerities practiced at great hardship and posing as superior are rajasic. Austerity to occupy the top-ranking position or for securing the first seat of honor in conferences and dinner parties without allowing anyone else to secure it. Practiced with the motive that one should be qualified for universal praise or that the world should make his home a place of pilgrimage. For enabling himself to enjoy all homage from the people, to the exclusion of others. For enhancing his own market value by giving his body and speech a coating of austerity, in the way an ugly-looking person should adorn himself with fine dress and ornaments. In short, any austerities practiced with a longing for riches and honor are called rajasic austerities. A cow affected with disease yields no milk even after giving birth to its young. In that way, any austerities practiced with great pomp and fanfare become entirely fruitless. So it's like a diseased form of austerity. You're not going to get any benefit out of it. Seeing that his austerities are futile, he leaves them incomplete. Therefore, they have no steadfastness about them. So Jnaneshwar takes it a little bit differently, the lack of steadfastness. Unseasonal clouds covering a vast area and making a deep and powerful thunder in the sky disturb the world. Yet, do they last long? In that way, rajasic austerity turns out fruitless and barren and is not practiced to its completion. So it happens here in Chicago area also. You have these ominous clouds and they're making a lot of noise and you think, oh, here a big downpour is going to come, and then they just go the other way and then nothing happens. So he's saying it's just kind of like a feint. You want to show off, but nothing comes of it. A more modern commentator has said, the rajasic man, I should have mentioned all these in the beginning. Sattva means purity and a balanced mind. Rajas means lack of purity, selfishness is there, and it's not a balanced mind. It's mostly hyperactive. And then the worst, tamas, is not just selfishness, but the readiness to harm others to accomplish their goals. And also they are neither pure, balanced, nor hyperactive. They're mostly lazy and indolent. So he's talking about the middle one, Rajasic person. He says the Rajasic man does not understand that austerity is the means to recast his base nature into a benevolent one. This is exactly what any seeker wants to do. They know that they have shortcomings, they desperately want to get rid of them, and they want to know how. That's all they want to know. How do I recast my nature and make it a higher nature? Well, he's saying this is austerity. That's all you need. Doing some kind of tapas. But they don't understand that. The Rajasic people don't understand that. And he says, as children play by imitating the actualities in life, this man imitates tapas for mere show. He expects others to esteem him as a man of austerity. The way of the world is to hold a holy man in great regard. At least this is Indian, right? The Rajasic man avails himself of that trust in society and poses as a man given to severe spiritual discipline. So it's like when Ravana wore the guise of a ascetic and kidnapped Sita. So very much like that. Ravana was the one who set the example, the bad example. Apart from gaining adoration from the public, he has no other purpose for his austerity. There is no stability in it. After the glamour is over, he either suspends or puts an end to it. There is no spiritual value in this kind of Rajasic austerity. So Amma is very careful in sort of guiding her disciples when they seem to be going away from the sattvic or the pure version to the Rajasic version. This was about 40 years ago, and one brahmachari was about to go out of the ashram wearing a big black rudraksha mala, a rosary, over his white clothes. Amma noticed him. She's like, stop. Son, remove that mala, that rosary, or people will stare at you. We don't need any external show of devotion. Devotion is not in all that. It is purely internal. And then she talks about Kali Yuga like this is something we have to practice for the next 250,000 years. In this Kali Yuga, we must wear nice clothes and comb our hair. We should teach spirituality to others without any external show. So these days, because it's Kali Yuga, perhaps some people are kind of tempted to make a big show of their so-called spirituality. And I must admit that the first time I went to see Amma, it was this hall in some college in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Amma walked in the hall and they just chanted some verses, as you know, that we do when Amma enters the hall. And she just walked in. She was the shortest person there, got up on the stage and sat down. I was like, that's all? I thought there was going to be like all kinds of special effects and everything. Because my brother took me there. And I was looking at him, I was like, where's all the dry ice and all the smoke and everything? I mean, I expected to see that because I was a fool. I mean, I think that's to be expected. So, but that's the Kali Yuga way of doing it. And Amma does not embrace that. She says we have to be real, we have to be sincere, and that doesn't mean you show off your spirituality through big malas and things like that. So basically, Amma is always telling us that it's about our motive. It's our intentions that matter. And we could even call it our sankalpa, our resolve. In the previous verse, the motive was noble and selfless, but in this description of tapas, it's definitely selfish. So gaining fame, honor, and worship, ostentation, all of these are clarified. It's pretty clear. Shankaracharya makes it pretty clear in his commentary. They make a big show of it to get attention and respect. They want everyone to say, oh, he does so many pujas and he's giving so many donations to the temple and he meditates so much. Any such austerity practice with a selfish motive is rajasic. And then the unstable and transitory portion, though the word fruit doesn't come in the verse, Shankaracharya elaborates and clarified that. When a person does sadhana or puja for personal gain, it really should be done very properly to get the desired outcome. And if you didn't know, the more mistakes we make, the less benefit comes from our efforts. And there can even be negative results. Amma has said that, and if you do it with some selfish, especially idea of hurting somebody else, if you make mistakes, all that karma comes back to you. I mean, it comes back to you anyhow, but the mistakes come back to you also. So that is why it is considered to be unstable and limited, because there's so many ways we can make mistakes, and so the effect is reduced. But in the case of karma yoga, there is no such problem, no such problems at all. Because as Krishna said before in chapter 2, verse 40, in this karma yoga, no effort is lost and no negative results will come. Why not? Well, it's because we are practicing karma yoga for inner purification, and that inner purification comes simultaneously with the karma yoga, with the seva that we do, with when any kind of selfless action that we do, the purification happens instantaneously. So we may butcher the Lalita Sahasranamam in the beginning, but so long as we are doing it merely as a spiritual practice, there are no negative effects. At least we can console ourselves that we're not getting any negative effects from it. And we're getting more patience. I should confess, when I first went to Amma's ashram in San Ramon, I think it was when I came back. I met Amma in early June, then I went to Hawaii for a few months. When I came back in December, I used to go there for all the weekend programs until I went to India. And they were chanting the 108 names in some song form, which was really beautiful in retrospect. But it was so painful for a 22-year-old, very restless young man. And that was before I went to India. And when I got to India, I found out there was a version with 1,000 names in it. That sounded like pure torture. And my routine every morning was it was backbreaking, and I really struggled because it was too much for me, at that time. So I would have to wake up at 3:30 because the Archana was at 4:30. So I woke up at 3:30 and I took a shower, got myself ready, and then I was with my brother who's in a wheelchair, and I would help him take a bath also. Then I would put him back on the bed, and I'd take his wheelchair over to the Kali temple. I'd come back, piggyback him over to the Kali temple in time for the 4:30 starting. And after doing that for a month, I was just completely mush because it was too much for my brain. But what happened is I got used to it. I was there for 3 months, and by the end of that 3 months, I really got into that routine, and I was doing it when I got back. And that's the funny thing. And then when I did my first retreat in Japan, I think it was 1997, after we had Archana in the morning, and after Archana, a woman came to me and she says, "That was absolutely torturous." She was her first time. And then I was about to react, and I thought, well, that's how I felt the first time around. So I said, look, don't worry, it takes time. I didn't like it in the beginning either. Okay, let's move on to verse 19. Mudha grahanatmano. Grahenatmano. Yat pidaya kriyate tapaha But they can't read this part slowly. I have to put it as one word. Parasyotsadhanartam va tattamasam tattamasam udahritam. Now together. Modhagrahenatmano yat pidaya kriyate tapaha parasyot sadhanartam va tattamasam udahritam. It's much easier to chant when you do it together than trying to cut it up in pieces. Few small changes here. Austerity that is practiced through deluded notions with self-torture or for the purpose of ruining others is declared to be tamasic. So, I think most of us know that the word perversity conjures up unnecessary images in our mind, so we don't need that word. But in India it's used quite freely in this meaning of deluded notions, that kind of thing. So they say perverted intellect. Well, it doesn't mean what it sounds like in America or in the Western world. A perverse intellect means one that thinks of all kinds of crazy things that one need not think of. So, but I changed it just to save you all that question marks popping up in your mind. So Jnaneshwar, he says, now about one practicing tamasic austerities. He has an air of foolishness about him and treats his body as an enemy. He exposes himself to sacred fires on every side and kindles so much internal heat that the body burns. Actually, I should mention that I did a small version of this, foolishly, last year when we had our first Homa. It was mid-June. And I underestimated just how hot it was and just how sunny it was going to become. So when I sat down, when I was about to sit down for the Homa, and somebody asked me, don't you need to wear sunscreen? And then I was like, no, I'm going to just, swallow all this. I'm ready for some tapas. Well, I still have sunburns on the body from that. In other words, it's been almost a year, but you can see the color of the vibhuti I put on my arm because that was the only place that didn't get sunburned. So you have 3 lines here, 3 lines here. I still have them just very faintly a year later. I should have worn sunscreen in retrospect. Then he goes on to say, he pricks his back with iron hooks and tears out his own flesh. When I read this, I thought, who in the world would do such things? And then I thought, are there people doing it? And so I just consulted the guru, Google. Not Satguru, just the worldly guru. And it was right there. Almost major religions have such people. They put hooks in themselves. I won't even get into it. It's really appalling. But it actually exists today. And he says, he holds his breath for a long time and observes fasts in vain. It's in vain because he's not getting any benefit out of it because it's the wrong type of it's the wrong kind of tapas. He stands on the rocky embankment of a river, its icy cold water reaching as far as his neck. Here I have to share a funny story. This is from before I joined the ashram. I had been to the ashram twice, and so I was really getting into this thing about some kind of austerities. And on the 1st of January, in that village, they have a tradition. This was way out in the in the sticks, as they say, the boonies, as they say, in Japan. and a very small village. I just ended up there working for the government. So on January 1st of every year, all the unmarried young people, I think up to age 25, are supposed to gather in a particular part of the village, and they are going to be doused with freezing cold water. And they have to do it wearing those robes that they wear, you know, in Japanese, what do they call them? Like hot springs. It's just one gown, it's like a bathrobe or something, but very thin. So it's only men, it's not women. They throw all kinds of freezing cold water on you, and then they make you walk to another place, and then you do it again, and I was enjoying it it was freezing, but I was enjoying it as a kind of tapas that I envisioned myself doing in Puri. But it was so much that most of the people got sick the next day, and then they couldn't go to their jobs. I think I probably was one of them, if I can remember correctly. So don't try these kind of things. It doesn't really have any meaning or benefit. As he continues, Jnaneshwar says, in this way he inflicts self-torture in various ways and practices austerities solely for the purpose of causing destruction to others. When a big and heavy boulder gets dislodged from its position, it crashes down from a great height, gets broken into fragments, and crushes whatever comes in its path. In that way, he causes torture to happy souls and practices austerities for the glory of conquering others. Austerities that come from such dreadful self-torture are called tamasic austerities. And then in the previous verse, there was a reference that Jnaneshwar made regarding this kind of austerity, so I'm adding it here instead of the previous verse. Tamasic activity deprives one of fame in this world as well as in the other world, in other words, heaven. So it goes exactly against to what they want. They want to be known, they want to be, revered, but they lose all their fame, not only here, but in the afterworld as well. And the commentary of a more modern person here is, among human beings, there are individuals resembling stones and blocks. Their intellectual development is yet incomplete. Ideals in life are imperfectly understood by them. Such dullards also often take to the practice of austerity without understanding its scope. Instead of outgrowing the body consciousness through awareness of the true self, they are body-centered and torture it religiously. Occasionally, they stumble upon some siddhi, some psychic power, which they utilize for hurting, wrecking, or destroying others. These people are tamasic in their performance of austerity. So the first time that I actually got instruction on meditation was maybe a month after I met Amma, and I was in Hawaii, and there was no Amma anything there. But there was some ashram of another group there, and I didn't know the difference, so I just went and I said, maybe I'll try to learn meditation. And one person picked me out and says, okay, you're a new person, I can tell. You have to go for the orientation. And I went there, and I was just sitting there, and there were two other guys, and they were talking about their meditation. And one guy said, yeah, yesterday when I was meditating, I opened my eyes and I was floating like 6 feet in the air, and I got scared. And I was like, wow, that's what yogis do? And the other guy was like, they were competing with each other. The other guy's, yeah, I went to the moon and Mars and I came back, and I was like, wow. And then later on I realized that this is the kind of thing that frauds do. They try to compete with each other, and they come up with bigger and bigger lies to make other people think that they're great. But really, they're just, it's just competition, which is a very low emotion in human beings. So we have 3 basic points here. The source of this kind of tapas, if we can call it that, is deluded notions. And the method is self-torture, and the intention is to hurt other people. So all three are very bad, and so the outcome definitely can't be good. What does he mean by deluded notions? Well, they are completely confused about the real purpose of tapas because of these false ideas. That means that they never learned properly, or they learned improperly, or they rejected the proper teachings. We don't know which one, but the outcome is the same. The proof of their ignorance is the method that they choose, which is self-torture. They think that by torturing their body, they will get extraordinary powers. Actually, a lot of people still feel like they're going to get special, extraordinary powers, siddhis, from doing different types of crazy sadhana. But the question is, what happens after you get that siddhi? If you yourself don't have spiritual maturity, that's just going to inflate your ego. It's not going to help you grow it. You're going to go backwards. So they don't understand that. And Krishna said something similar in chapter 17, verse 6. When he was talking about tamasic faith, he said, senseless as they are, they torture the body. So they're senseless. They don't know what they're doing. And so whatever they do is going to be backwards, basically. And the actual meaning of the Sanskrit word here is weakening the body. So you're doing things that make the body weaker and weaker. So how are you going to grow spiritually? Mom tells us to protect the body so that we can serve the world. And here they are destroying the body just for the sake of some low goal. Some people can fast a long time without losing all their strength. Typically, that's people like kapha, people that have the kind of, what would you say, they have it stored up in their bodies. They can do a little more fasting than really skinny people can. But there are people who have health problems. So whatever body type it is, or whatever your will is, you still should consult with your doctor if you have any health conditions. And if we disobey the doctor's instructions and get an ulcer, we are only making our sadhana even more difficult, and we might even create trouble for those around us, which we definitely don't want to do. Because Amma says that compassion is one of the most important qualities to cultivate. So why would we want to sacrifice compassion just for the sake of sadhana? In fact, our sadhana is for acquiring compassion and other good qualities. So Maunam is also a very good form of sadhana for gaining mastery over our words. So practicing it for a day, a week, maybe even a month can be very good for any seeker. We just have to make sure that we're not creating problems for others in the process. That's another reason to remember compassion. If someone is in dire straits and they said, I need help, call an ambulance, sorry, I'm in silence, We have to be practical, and compassion should be the determining factor. Ultimately, constant moderation in speech is the best way. You just choose the right words, the right time, the right place, and always avoid harming others with your words. Even if there's something truthful to say, there must be a non-harmful way of expressing it. Here's a bizarre story that I just have to share with you. Somebody said that they met a person in India who said, I have not touched food for 10 years. It seems one day he made a vow that he would never touch food again. And it sounds like a very impressive sadhana. I mean, I don't know how somebody could actually think of making such a vow. Then one day, he visited this man's house at lunchtime. Everybody sat at the table, including the man who hadn't touched food for 10 years. And he was like, what's going on? Then his wife came in and started to spoon feed him. He was 65 or 70 years old, and he seemed to be intelligent on the surface. And his friends were showing so much respect to him. But I mean, I feel like they should show respect to his wife instead. What a crazy vow to take. He couldn't do that if he's single, right? But when he visited an ashram, he even asked the brahmachari, the monk there, to feed him. It's crazy. It's a perfect example of self-torture and torturing others based on deluded notions. And then this point about for ruining others, what does that mean? Well, if you remember India's spiritual folklore in the form of the Puranas, you will probably remember that all the Rakshasas in the Puranas did this kind of tapas. They were doing all kinds of horrible things, torturing themselves, torturing animals, whatever it is, and just to get special powers. And then they would go around harming everybody, everywhere, like Hiranyakashipu. In the Mahabharata also, there are characters like Shikandi who are born just to kill someone else. Their birth was the fruit of tremendous tapas, but it was all wasted just for getting revenge. How sinister is that? And what a waste of energy and time. Since anything like this that involves himsa automatically falls into the category of tamasic tapas, or tamasic actions, tamasic goals, tamasic thoughts. So let's just to sort of summarize everything. This has been the basic pattern so far. Doing things from pure intentions for the sake of the world is sattva. Rajas is selfishness without directly harming others, while tamas is selfishness with no hesitation to harm others. And to be completely upfront, the Vedas do include such rituals, the tamasic rituals, for the sake of destroying enemies. It seems very misleading, right? And it is intentional because it is the only way to bring confused tamasic people to the truth. Amma has her own version of that, which is giving chocolate to a shy or angry toddler in order to bring them closer to her. And once they're close, Amma can shower them with love and affection and change their lives. This is what the Vedas intend to do as well. It's not a whole lot, it's not a large portion of the Vedas, but it is there to hook the people who are very selfish into that system of the Vedas so they can evolve higher and higher as the Vedas will compel them to do so. So the Vedas are full of compassion, but a tamasic person is not interested in that, at least not initially. Over time, they develop faith in the scriptures and the teachings of a realized master. And after that, they will be under the tutelage of a Sadguru. So we can think of such people as ourselves a few births before. We must have thought of killing somebody at some point in our evolution. We must have wanted to get revenge against somebody in our process of evolution. And maybe we did something like that in the past. But because we found higher and higher forms of satisfaction through some spiritual framework, we were able to give value to a being like Amma. That doesn't come just by chance. So keep in mind that the Vedas don't say that you can destroy your enemies with karmic immunity. The karma of such harmful rituals inevitably comes back to the perpetrator, and if that's us, we have nobody to blame. We have to just suffer through that, and hopefully that will make people realize that it was a dumb thing to do, and they move on spiritually. With this, the topic of the three types of tapas categorized by guna is now concluded. Whether we're talking about the body, speech, or thought, tapas can be sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. And Jnaneshwar says as an introduction to the next topic, I have thus made clear to you how physical austerities are classified according to sattva and other gunas. Now I shall tell you the aspects of the three classes of charity, which is the last topic. Here also charity is similarly divided into three categories. And let's hear what he has to say about that in verse 20. Datavyam iti yadanam diyate nupa. Sorry, one second. Datavyam iti yadanam diyate nupakarine deshe kale cha patre cha taddanam satvikam smritam. I didn't change this at all, I don't think. A gift given by a sense of duty to one who does no service in return, in a fit place and time, and to a deserving person, that gift is said to be sattvic. Now the commentary from the various commentators. Shankaracharya says about that part given by a sense of duty, etc. He says, it should be to one who cannot return the favor, or to one from whom no such return is expected. Then Jnaneshwar says about sattvic charity, he gives away in charity with the greatest regard whatever wealth he can, according to his own duty. Even if good seed is available, there may not be any fertile soil. Similar is the state experienced in regard to charity. When one's good fortune is in the ascendance, riches automatically come. In that way, when sattva guna comes to the help of charity, place, time, recipient, and riches automatically assemble. So Amma is pure sattva. So whenever she feels to give something, there's automatically all these factors are going to come into play, fall into place. I'll give you an example from the 2004 tsunami. Amma announced on January 3rd, 2004, that her ashram would spend about $25 million in reconstructing houses for those who lost their homes. Actually, it ended up being $50 million or so, because Amma widened the scope. She added so many things. She made roads for them, boats, and so many surgeries and all that. So for people who need, because they wanted to have birth again, so they had to, they had their tubes tied, they undid that, and so many things were added there to the list of things she was going to do. So when she was asked how she was able to commit such a large amount in aid, Amma replied, "My children are my strength. I have many good children. They all do what they can." Amma attributes all of the ashram's successes to the renunciation and selfless service of her children. Before starting an inspiring project, Amma has never spent time calculating whether it is feasible or not. When Amma felt the need, she has committed, and by grace, they have always come together. Like AIMS, the ashram's super specialty hospital for the poor, and the 3 villages completely rebuilt in Gujarat after the 2001 earthquake. So I am sure this will also materialize. She has so much confidence because every time all the factors fall in place. Coming back to Jnaneshwar's commentary, he gives a few examples of the suitable place and time, etc. And then he says, at such a time and place, there should be a person who deserves the charity, one who is purity incarnate. He sets the bar really high. They should be the very abode of good conduct for the dissemination of spiritual knowledge, and also a holy gem amongst seekers. How are we going to find people like that? I think Amma just thinks her children, all of them are that. So she supports her children. Charity should be given with a motive-free mind. Nay, no expectation of return whatsoever should be allowed to arise in the mind. It can't even come in the mind. Wow, God, it's really strict. The recipient selected should also be such that there is absolutely no possibility of a return for the charity given. So you really have to find the right person. No reflection can ever be seen on the reverse side of a mirror. A ball bounced in a marshy ground does not bounce back. In that way, once given, charity should not come back to the giver in any way whatsoever. Also, there should not be any feeling in the mind that one is the donor and the other is the recipient. Charity given under such conditions is sattvic, the best of all charity. Well, I think if that's the standard, I think hardly anybody in the whole world actually does charity properly, except for Amma. Always the ego gets involved. So it's just degrees, perhaps. You could say like 1% pure, 100% pure. Somewhere in between, we'll all fall. A modern commentator says, anything given with expectation of a return reward is no gift. It just doesn't count as a gift. It is only an exchange of courtesy or hospitality. In some cases, it happens to be a motivated investment. You know, like if I help him, maybe later he's going to help me. But a genuine gift is one that is voluntarily offered, expecting nothing in return. The recipient is necessarily a person who is not in a position to make a return gift. At the same time, they must be worthy of the gift, and whatever is given to them should be well spent on worthy causes. See, that's why Amma says you shouldn't give money to people whom you don't know, because you don't know what they're going to use it for. And they can use it for bad habits or to do bad things. We don't know. So that's why Amma always gives food. The attitude of the giver is more important than the gift itself. The gift should be made with a sense of sacred duty, in humility and modesty, and to the best of one's ability, the means at one's disposal ought to be shared with deserving people. So as much as you can, no more, no less. That should be shared. To a person residing in one region, a gift made in another distant region is not one given at the right place. So if you go somewhere, you know, like I just remember this silly thing that I did. Before I went to left in Japan for good and moved to India, I was trying to think of some gift I could give Amma when I get back, because I had been twice and this was the final one. And so I thought, there's so much bamboo behind the house where I was living in Japan. I said, maybe I can make something out of it. So I cut down a piece of bamboo, which grows crazy everywhere there. And somehow I managed to whittle it down. And then, of all things, I made a pair of chopsticks for her. With so much, joy and a little bit of pride too. I took it with me to Puri, and this was the gift I gave to her. She was like, it just kept falling on the ground. And everybody got a good laugh out of it. But it was like, that's Japanese. Why would you give that to an Indian guru? I don't know what I was thinking, but, at least I'd spent a lot of time thinking about Amma while I was whittling them. So the gift ought to be made when there is a need for it also. So an example of that, like here in America, when you envision what's the lifestyle of people in a faraway place like Kenya, Africa, you know, you're just basing it on your own experience. You really have no idea what their needs are. It's like this story that a humorous story I used to tell. There was a rich girl who, you know, went to school, and the teacher told them to write, you know, what it's like, what it's like to be poor. And so she says, okay, she starts writing. Says, this family was very poor. The father was poor. The mother was poor. The children were poor. The dog was poor. The butler was poor. The maid was poor. Everybody was poor. So this is how we visualize it. We don't understand what they're going through. So once when I was going to Kenya from the US, people said that some people found out that I was going to Kenya, and they said, can we give you soccer balls, and can we give you like these kind of toys and like train sets or whatever it is. I can't remember all the things. And I thought about it, and I thought, you know, you should just give money because I don't know what they need. And whatever they do need, they can get it in Kenya a lot cheaper. So we can help more people if you just give cash. I sensed that was a little bit of a, you know, sort of a letdown for them, because they had this desire to go out and buy something for the kids. But really, I'm glad that I insisted on cash, because when I got there was a drought, and people were literally dying, or the cows were dying due to the drought. And these people had nothing to eat, the people nearby the children's home. And I was invited to one of their, so they call them bomas, which is this like a circular hut. And the man took me inside there, and it was pitch dark. They don't have any electricity, obviously. And he lit a candle, and there his sick mother was lying on the floor. And they have no food. They had the children there with the bulging stomachs due to malnutrition. And I felt so bad. I went to the car, and I just looked for some kind of food. Then I had an apple, and I gave her an apple. I said, "I'm sorry, this is all I have. I'll bring more food tomorrow." And then I had 2 banana peels, because I was so hungry. I had eaten 2 bananas. I wish I hadn't. Once I saw their, you know, condition. And I said, here, you can, no, actually I gave them the apple first, then they came back out, and then I gave them the banana peels, and I said, please feed this to your cows, because if the cows become healthy, then, you know, you'll get some milk from them. She looked at the banana peels, and then she just gathered the kids and took them inside the hut. She was not going to give them to the cows. They were so desperate, she gave the kids the banana peels. So I felt so bad, and then after that we kept giving them more and more. There was a whole village of people. I mean, so the money went to that rather than, you know, soccer balls, which they didn't need at the time. And but Amma does other things that are not only at the right time, but in the right way. So in these very rural villages where she gives a lot of help, there are no bathrooms. And the women don't even know how to build bathrooms, because most of those things are done by men. But in a very novel project that originated from Amma's ashram and university, they taught the women how to make their own toilets. And Amma said originally people would not go in there because it was so clean. They felt like it was sacrilegious to do their business there. And so when one of the members went to see how things are going, they were spotless. And then they said, why aren't you guys using them? They said, no, it's like, we're folding our palms in front, and like, it looks like a temple. It's so clean. And so then they realized they had to really kind of acclimate them to these new kind of toilets. And so once they learned how to use them, how to clean them, and all that, then they understood that it's safer for them in many ways, and so they have to use them. And so not only they teach them how to build them, they taught them the importance and why it matters, you know. And especially for little kids and everything, they need to have hygiene at a young age. So that's a different version of giving the right thing at the right time. In verse 7 of this same chapter, Krishna promised to talk about 4 topics. We finished 3 of them, and this one, charity, is the last of the 4. It's not only a very important virtue. Here, Krishna even says that it is a duty in this verse we just read. It's not just whether you do it or not. It's a duty. Everybody has to do it, or almost everybody. We'll get to that. And in chapter 18, verse 5, he will say, the work of sacrifice, charity, and austerity should not be given up. It should indeed be performed, for they are purifying. So charity in Sanskrit is dhanam, so we'll use dhanam if you don't mind. It's also emphasized in the Taittiriya Upanishad in a very interesting way, because it's a teaching about God realization, but it's to householders. Let the offering be made with faith. Let not any offering be without faith. Offer in plenty. Offer with modesty. Offer with reverence. Offer with goodwill. Dhanam, or charity, is not giving something we no longer need. This is the confusion that a lot of people have. It should be a regular allocation of our income, our revenue, possessions, etc., according to each person's capacity. So it's not the value or amount that matters, it's the attitude of some kind of sacrifice, self-sacrifice. So that means that giving a broken bicycle, a dusty and stained couch, or something we don't want to get something that we want to get rid of, that none of those qualify as a form of charity. So just understand that the rule of thumb is don't donate something that you yourself would not use, eat, or appreciate if you needed to. So we don't want to give somebody something that we wouldn't even want. We should try to, let's say we were in dire straits. Maybe we would compromise our food expectations a bit, but we would at least eat it. So if you think, what if I were in their position? You don't have to tell Bill Gates that, because for him it would be a $5,000 dinner, right? So whatever it is, so whoever, in their condition, what would we want? That's the question. And if a householder doesn't give back to society, it creates a blockage in the cycle of give and take in society. So students don't have to contribute because they are going to do it later on in their life. And elderly, and people who are completely destitute, they don't have any obligation to give to society. And sannyasis, people who have renounced the world, like that, renunciates, they don't have that duty. Only householders have that duty because they're the ones who actually earn money on a regular basis. So, but they're also the majority of the world. So it should work out well if everybody participates. And that cycle of give and take, Krishna explains very beautifully in chapter 3, verses 10 to 12. He talks about all of the forces of nature and the forces in the body and in the other world. He calls them gods. So when you hear the word God, don't think of like Ganapati or Devi. It's just forces, natural forces within and without. In the beginning, having created humans along with yajna, which is sacred offering, the Lord of creation said, "By this yajna you shall prosper, and this shall bring forth the fulfillment of desires. Through yajna you sustain the gods, and those gods will sustain you. By sustaining one another, you will attain the highest good. Satisfied by the yajna, the gods will certainly bestow the enjoyments you desire. But one who enjoys their gifts without offering to them is merely a thief." So if you only take and you don't give back, you're a thief. But it could be your body, it could be somebody else's body. If you treat it properly, if you show reverence, if you serve that force in one other. Like let's say we conserve water, then water will bless us in the form of rain when we need it. Amma says all these problems with the climate and everything are just because humans have not been shown reverence to Mother Nature. So that chain got cut, and that's why we're suffering. Even if we don't give back, there may be some pleasure in the short run, but in the long run, such people will become more and more selfish, and they will ruin their own personal life and their children, because they're going to teach their children to be greedy, stingy, and all these things. So to avoid becoming a slave of their desires and their mind, some kind of austerity and some kind of tapas is going to be compulsory. A selfish or miserly person will definitely find dhanam to be difficult because it means losing something. And when we talk about cheerfulness and kindness, truthfulness, that doesn't cost anything. So they can mentally accept it even if they don't practice it. But when you're talking about money, even mentally they can't accept it because it's like, oh, I need all this money. So most people are focusing on gaining in today's world because the mind is so extroverted by nature, and it's even worse in Kali Yuga. So that leads us to believe that I am becoming more full each time I gain something. These days people are so concerned about how many views their video got or how many likes they got, even though all of it has no real substance. It's just ethereal, you know. The unreal and unsubstantial nature of social media means more to them than the real human beings around them. You may be checking your, YouTube channel or something, but you don't even look to see whether your elderly mother or father got food. I mean, it's just an exaggeration, but this can happen. Amma has 15 million followers on Facebook, but she has no interest in that at all. That is precisely why everybody follows her. She has found fullness within herself. I mean, she had it from birth, rather than relying on others' perception of her. And the most amazing thing is that through giving away all that comes to her, Amma has not only shown her spiritual wealth, but she has also helped millions of destitute families to lead a stable life, material life. And that allows them to seek a deeper meaning in life and to find the inner fullness that Amma reveals. She can't say, everything, you're God, feel the fullness that I feel. They have to eat, they have to have a house, they have to have textbooks for their studies. So she, recognizing that, she gives away everything that comes to her. And then other people start to understand these spiritual principles, and then they can practice it, but not until they have the basic needs met. There's a beautiful scripture text called Vairagya Shatakam. I hope I can read out a few verses before we run out of time. When we were about to have our sannyasa in initiation, and a little bit afterwards, I was reading all these scriptures about Vairagya, about non-attachment. And I really like this passage. I want to share it with you. He's talking about the life of a renunciate, especially towards the end of their life, when they're just in bliss, living in the open, under the open sky with no possessions at all. He describes such a person. The earth is his high bed, the arms his arms, his ample pillow. The sky is his canopy, the genial breeze his fan, the autumnal moon is his lamp, and rejoicing in the company of renunciation is his wife. So renunciation is his wife. The sage lies down happily and peacefully like a monarch of undiminished glory. Who wouldn't want to be like that? There lives the real ascetic who feeds himself on alms, unattached to the society of men, always free in his efforts and pursuing a path of indifference. He is devoid of pride and egoism, and he is concerned only in enjoying the happiness arising from the control of mind. Will those happy days come to me when on the bank of the Ganga, sitting in the lotus posture on a piece of stone in the Himalayas, I shall fall into samadhi, resulting from a regular practice of the contemplation of Brahman. And when old antelopes have nothing to fear, having nothing to fear, will rub their limbs against my body. He's so peaceful that the animals just rub up against him. They're not afraid. With the hand serving as a sacred cup, with begged food that comes through wandering and never runs short, with the 10 directions, 8 directions, up and down, as their ample garment, and the earth as a fixed, spacious bed, blessed are they who, self-contented with a heart fully matured through their acceptance of absolute seclusion, root out all karma. Wow, just imagine what a sublime life that is. By contrast, a person who has enough wealth for hundreds of generations may not have any contentment. Out of curiosity, I looked up the top 5 richest people in the world, and I found that they've each had multiple marriages. So if you're thinking of separating due to financial problems, you might want to think again. What do they say? Like unresolvable differences. I forget the actual word, but that's understandable. And then if you want to find somebody else, but don't do it just for money, because this proves that money doesn't make the difference. People may have plenty of money, but inside they still feel incomplete. That is why dhanam is so important. Joyfully dropping some kind of possession reminds people that wealth isn't what makes us rich. It's contentment that makes us rich. The more possessions I need, the more empty I am. Contentment is the sign of fullness, not neediness. So then he says to the dhanam, or the charity, should be to one who does no service in return. These days, sometimes giving a gift or doing a favor for someone is a kind of I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back arrangement. It really doesn't mean anything in this terms of spirituality. Somewhere inside, we are counting on them to reciprocate in the future. And in some cultures, the parents calculate whether their children's education is going to pay off in the long run. If I spend all this money on my children, will they take care of me later? What if they don't? In truth, the parents' responsibility to the children is unconditional. The innocent children never think, what's going to happen to me if my parents don't take care of me? So the child's dharma is to surrender to the parents, and similarly, the parents should surrender to their children when they're raising them and even in old age. Even if things don't go as wished or expected, a good parent can console themselves that they did their duty. So this dhanam, or this charity, is a rehearsal for tyaga, for renunciation. If a person prepares themselves by making small donations over an extended time, their mind will expand, and a time will come when they can happily give up everything. It might be through sannyasa, or definitely, if not then, it'll be when death comes. So when Krishna says, give gifts from a sense of duty, it's not for God's sake, but for the sake of the giver. Each one of us benefits from it. It's also an eternal truth. Children, full-time students, destitute people, the elderly, and those who live a life of renunciation don't have resources to give in charity. That means that householders with a stable income are the only ones that can support society. So what about the recipient? Who is the deserving recipient? The recipient must deserve the charity. We do annadhanam for people in Amma's ashrams, which means you give food like to the homeless people, but you give it to hungry people, not to people who have a full stomach, right? So drought-ridden places need the rain, not the ocean. Just like that, some people show a lot of generosity to the wealthy, but haggle bitterly with people who lack enough resources to survive. It should be the other way around. We should be like the rain, which offers itself without any expectation of recompense. You don't have to give money to rich people. It's the poor people that need it. You don't have to give food to people who have a lot of food in their fridge already. It should go to people who need food. And these days, it is truly difficult to discern between the deserving and undeserving recipients. I'll tell you a story. One day Amma was going from, I just heard this secondhand, I don't know if it's 100% true. Amma was driving from her accommodations to the hall where she was going to have her program, and they went through a kind of a depressed area, economically depressed area, and there was one fellow standing on the corner saying, you know, he needs something, he needs help. And then Amma told the driver to stop the car. She rolled down the window and she had some fruits in the back seat. She didn't have any money, obviously. So she gave him the fruits. And he looked at it and he says, I don't want this. I want food for the soul. Give me money. She just, it left. Because food is the best thing that you can give to anybody. It's the safest thing. We don't know what that man would have done with the money if she had given it to him. So, or you can give your donations to a reputable non-profit organization with low overhead. Keep that in mind. But beware of door-to-door solicitations. There's a lot of fakes going around these days. And you should also know that just because an organization has been around for a long time or has a famous person's name on it or something, it doesn't mean that the governance is always going to be sound. There are websites that tell you the ratings of the governance, so you be careful about that. And also, you should know that some organizations pay their CEOs millions of dollars, so you might want to look into that before you make your donation. I feel it's safer and more comfortable to just give the charities to Amma, because our CEO collects her salary in the form of millions and millions of hugs and darshans. That's all she expects her children to do, is come, be in her arms, and serve the world. She doesn't get anything out of them serving the world, so the only thing she gets is the hugs from her children. And we're the ones that are actually getting it, but you know what I mean. A lot of people make their contribution in the form of time and effort. In Amma's ashram, there are always things to do which help everybody who lives or participates there, in addition to supporting Amma's countless humanitarian projects. At the same time, we benefit from such selfless actions because our mind is purified as a result. So the donations can be money, possessions, skills, time, energy, love, so many things. So don't think it has to be money only. And what is the fit place? Well, the fit place should be an auspicious event, perhaps. So a funeral is not the opportune time to give money, though some people do it that way. There are some traditions like that, I know. And an offering of food or physical support might be what the grieving family needs more, in the example of a funeral. Some things can be done publicly, but not all forms of charity. For example, we won't give something in front of everybody if it makes the others jealous. But Amma does it intentionally to inspire others to do the same. So the interpretation of a fit place depends on the situation. Same with the fit time. There is a fit time for everything. I mean, if you give warm clothes in the midsummer, people are not going to be happy, so that's not a very thoughtful or helpful gift. But suntan lotion might be appreciated. The scriptures also suggest that offerings can be done on eclipse days or Sankranti, which means when the sun transits from one constellation to another. These were actually examples that Shankaracharya proposed. So from all these points, we can easily understand that sattvic charity is based on selflessness, thinking of others' needs and wants, not our own. I just have one more story to tell you before I conclude. Thinking about others' needs and wants reminds me of this story. When I was about to leave Japan to join the ashram, hopefully forever, in 1993, I told my boss and coworkers about my plans. They said, "Don't you want to get married and have kids?" And I said, "I don't think so." I was 23 or 4, so I wasn't quite sure, but I was hoping that I didn't get married and have kids. They looked so shocked when I said that. Then one of them articulated what everybody was thinking. "Who's going to take care of you in your old age?" I was completely dumbstruck. I thought, it never occurred to me that I should have a wife and kids as some kind of a long-term deposit to cash in at the end of my life. So I told them that I'm not worried about that right now. And I really couldn't believe, why would anybody get married and have kids just to have like an insurance policy? I don't think they were very convinced with my response because I wasn't thinking of it. But later, after I got to India and I was reading the Gita, I found the answer to their question in chapter 9, verse 22. "Those who constantly meditate on me as not separate from beings, who worship me in all beings, to them I give full protection and fulfill their needs." So I realized, okay, fortunately, I'm in the right place, I've done the right thing, and Amma will protect me, I don't have to worry about it. And Amma teaches us to help people, all beings, even if they don't help us in return. And she says, if we do so, that God will take care of us. She has said, no sincere seeker has ever starved for lack of food. Amma guarantees this. She said she guarantees it. So far, I haven't starved. She was definitely right. I mean, it's like a flood of food for me. So definitely, I'm not worried about starving, but we still have to maintain that same spirit of constantly serving all beings. It's not, only when you get food or what you want. It should be irrespective of what comes next. Serving all beings is the best life insurance in the world. So with that, we will conclude today's class. There were no questions. If you have some questions, I think we have the email address that we can post in the chat window, hopefully. And you can send your questions to that address next time. And I'll try to answer those if you have any. So we will close for the time being with the first two closing prayers, after which those of you who have some more time, you can meditate with us. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Om Amriteshwariye Namaha. Let us meditate together for some time. Check your posture and close your eyes. Slow down the breathing process and turn the mind inwards. With each long, deep breath, you feel the body and mind relaxing further and further. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence all around you. Feel you're enveloped in her arms. And feel her pure love in your heart. Now focus your awareness on the rhythmic flow of your breathing process. Feel the peaceful flow of your breath as it goes in and out. Simply watch that flow. Continue to witness the breath. let us, with this quiet state of mind, let us visualize something, a tapas we can do mentally. Of the three, body, speech, and mind, the mental tapas is most difficult. So mentally, let us visualize ourselves relinquishing something that we are attached to. It doesn't mean you physically are going to relinquish it necessarily. But something that we are attached to, if we can just hand it over to Amma, surrender it to Amma, that is a profound form of austerity. When you make your sacred offering to Amma in that way, visualize her face beaming with a huge smile. She's so proud of her child, making a selfless offering. She embraces you and holds you tightly in her arms. Now let us conclude with the final closing prayer. Take a deep breath. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can open your eyes if you wish. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you for joining us. Everybody, I hope you have already signed up for Swamiji's retreat. It is going to be an amazing experience, and I'm thinking that should probably skip the Gita class before that, because we want Swamiji's retreat to be the main thing for the next week or more. So definitely participate, and I will see you during the retreat. So that's the next time. Om Namah Shivaya.